3:08 here at KXNT, and a good afternoon. Great to have you with us on this finally Friday, St. Patrick's Day. Hope you're having a good day. Drive carefully after you visit the bar. Oh, yeah. Well, have a good one, and we'll celebrate right after the show today. All right.
Are we now? I like how you wore green.
I did. You didn't.
I didn't need to.
You're stubborn, I'm telling you.
I got my green Nerf gun, though.
Yeah, your green Nerf gun. Not the same as wearing the green, my lad. And today I'm Irish. Oh, stock today. That's right. Just to you. Got a lot of things going on today. First of all, we've got a pair of tickets to UNLVino's Bubblicious on March 30th at the Venetian. We'll give those away during the 5 o'clock hour. Also in the 5 o'clock hour, we've got Jeffrey K. Howard with movie reviews and our pet pick of the week, which you can always get a preview of at allenstock.com, kxnt.com, or either one of our Facebook pages. So having said that, let me get right into this. We were in Israel. We came back, and I saw a letter to the editor in the paper from a guy by the name of Seth Morrison. He's the coordinator of an organization called Jewish Voice for Peace. And in there, he says some things that I thought, you got to be kidding me. I just came back, and I didn't see anything that you saw whatsoever. So I decided to invite him on the show. We're going to talk about, you may have heard of it, it's the Boycott, Divest, and Sanction Movement, BDS, and they advocate an economic punishment of the democratic state of Israel. Now, leading this effort, obviously, are liberal Jews, and their efforts are aimed, they say, at true peace. Some say they're self-hating Jews. So which is it? Well, we're going to find out as we welcome to the KXNT studios Seth Morrison. I want to thank you for coming in this afternoon.
And thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity.
So I don't know. I know what the J Street is, and they're another organization similar to yours, I gather. You are rather new in town here, and you got a few members. I know that. So tell me, first of all, I don't get the idea. You want to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. Is that right?
That is correct.
And the purpose of that is?
We believe that Israel is oppressing the Palestinian people and is violating international law by the continued occupation of Palestinian territory.
How are they oppressing Palestinian people?
Well, you need to remember that there are two different issues here. One is the fact that 20% of the population of the state of Israel, that's within the Green Line, are Palestinians.
They're Arabs. They're Arabs.
They're Arabs.
Not all Palestinians. They're
not
Arabs.
all Palestinians.
That's right.
But the bottom line is that they're not Jewish.
That is.
Israel has over 50 laws on the books which disadvantage people who are not Jewish. Israel also has over 400 segregated communities. So let me make that very clear. For those of us like Alan and I who are Jewish, we can go to Israel and live anywhere we want, and we can do anything we want within the laws of the country. If you are not Jewish, there are over 400 communities where you can't live. It's just like being black in the 50s.
Isn't this amazing? Because what you're saying is exactly the exact opposite of what I saw. Here's what I saw. I have a cousin who lives an Orthodox Jew who lives in the western part of Jerusalem. And I said to him one day, we were there in 2014 during the war itself, during the outbreak of the war. And I said to him, what's it like living in an all-Jewish community? And he said, I don't know. Because our community in western Jerusalem is, they're Jews, they're Christians, they're Arabs, Muslims, they all live in harmony over there. I know there are places within the context of what is overall Israel today where Jews cannot live. Absolutely not. Ramallah and some other areas. Bethlehem, another area, by the way.
Sorry, but that's not true.
Well, I just got back from Bethlehem, and I got to tell you, it is a Arab, so-called Palestinian-run enclave.
That is correct.
And
it is Arab and Palestinian, but there are Jews living there. Very small number. But if you wanted to live there, you could. So there's a difference.
You can't live in Ramallah.
Yes, you can. Oh, no, you can.
There are no Jews in Ramallah. Not true.
Not true. They're a very small number. I agree it's a very small number. But I spent time in Ramallah. I have friends in Ramallah. And there are Jews who live there. So there's a difference between people who choose to live somewhere and not live somewhere and laws. Now, what I am saying is, and it's not Jerusalem. I agree. Jerusalem is a fully integrated city. But there are 400 communities, including the kibbutzim and the moshavim, where the land is owned by the Jewish National Fund, And the legal structure prohibits anybody who is not Jewish from living there.
And the purpose of that is because Israel is a Jewish state.
Okay, so you have just gone from denying segregation to trying to justify it.
No, what I'm saying to you is that Israel overall is a Jewish state. You would like to have a democratic state, and what I want is a Jewish state. And the reason there cannot be peace, and we'll talk about this throughout the show, is because the Palestinian Arab Muslims will not recognize Israel as a Jewish state. And they've repeated that over and over again, all the way from Yasser Arafat back in the early 60s, all the way up until Mahmoud Abbas last year. So we'll come on back, we'll talk about that and more, and get to your calls as well at 733-KXNT, 733-5968. Seth Morrison is the coordinator of the Jewish Voice for Peace, and we're going to come on back and continue our discussion about what's going on in Israel next on KXNT. 3:18 at KXNT, and a good afternoon. Great to have you with us on this Friday afternoon. Joining me in studio right now, Seth Morrison. He is the coordinator for the Jewish Voice for Peace, a local organization supporting the BDS against Israel. And so I appreciate your coming in this afternoon. And I do want to talk about you say that the Arabs, you call them Palestinians, they're actual Palestinians were Jews back in the 20s and 30s. You've heard of the Jerusalem Post. That used to be the Palestine Post. That was a Jewish newspaper. Palestine Philharmonic at one time. It's the Israeli Philharmonic. Mostly Jews in that area. And we will get into this idea about whether Arabs have rights, and they have all the rights that they would want to have, plus the biggest houses in Israel. But you know, Israel was set up as a Jewish state, and that was rejected by the Arabs back in 1947 and throughout 48 and 49, and Israel was forced to be able to fight for its own existence as a Jewish state. Fortunately, they won. They won all the subsequent wars that they've fought in, but they. I've heard Yasser Arafat say this. I talked to his aides back in 2001. They admitted this, and Mahmoud Abbas has said as very recently, they won't recognize Israel as a Jewish state. How do you have peace with someone who will not recognize your existence?
Well, first of all, what the Palestinian Authority has done, and it's very clear to make sure that you understand that they have recognized the state of Israel as a country.
Not as a Jewish state.
Not as a Jewish state.
Correct.
That is correct. But there is a real problem when you say that a state is supposed to be democratic and Jewish. You know, the U.S., the majority of people are Catholic, or Christian, I should say, sorry. And there are some people who say that the U.S. is a Christian country. But we do not have laws that discriminate against people who happen to be not Christian. And when you say a state is a, quote, Jewish state, you are saying that the state's, the rights, the privileges, the benefits of the state should not go to over 20% of the population. And to me, that is apartheid. That is discrimination.
Well, let me just put this very, very clear. Arabs, in fact, in Israel, own the biggest houses in Israel. I've seen those houses, by the way. I've driven by all total Arab enclaves, and they have houses that put some of these houses here in Summerlin to shame. I mean, you know, several stories high, and the communities that they develop are all their own family. So I've seen Arabs have biggest houses, and the Arabs, by the way, generally speaking, not all, but generally speaking, they don't pay taxes, especially places like Ramallah and Bethlehem, places like that.
Well, but you see, you're making a classic mistake.
I am?
Yes.
Oh, what's the mistake?
The mistake is that the areas outside the Green Line are occupied Palestinian territory. They are not part of the State of Israel. The State of Israel is within the Green Line. The 20% of the population within the Green Line is Arabs, mostly Arabs, not exclusively, and they do pay taxes. They do obey Israeli law. They are citizens of the State of Israel. They are second-class citizens, but they're citizens.
Well, they're not second-class citizens because they have the same rights as the Jews do.
They don't.
They
don't.
They do. They serve in the military if they want.
Yeah, they have, but they are discriminated against if they choose not to serve in the military. And as I said, there are still over 400 communities they can't live in. If you look at...
But those are the areas, by your own definition, that are outside of the so-called Green Line.
No, I'm saying within the Green Line. I'm saying...
And those people within the Green Line do not pay taxes.
Yes, they do.
No, they do not. I'm telling you right now. No, you're
you're absolutely wrong.
No, listen, I had the chance to talk to people in the Knesset, and they do not pay taxes.
That's a lie. That is an absolute lie.
In addition to the fact that they do pay they don't pay taxes, do you know that they have the same rights as I'm going to give you a couple examples of this, just so you know. They can become judges and serve in the Knesset, and they can serve. You had Judge Khalid Kaboub give prison time to the largest businessman in Israel, Arab Muslim Chief Judge Kara.
Yes.
Put former Israeli President Moshe Katzva in prison on rape charges. A Muslim Arab putting a former Jewish president in prison for rape charges. So you have all of this going on, and Arabs are, and the Palestinian Arabs are given equal opportunity to have jobs.
No,
and
they're not.
Well,
they're not. There are help wanted ads in Israel that say Army service required. And that is a code word to say no Arabs need apply.
Well, that's not true, because you just admitted a minute ago that, in fact, they do serve. Some of them do serve military.
A few of them serve.
Then when it says that you have to have military experience, these people are eligible to apply.
But this is an army that is oppressing the Palestinians throughout the West Bank, that is committing all kinds of atrocities.
What atrocities? Tell me about the atrocities.
There are hundreds of West Bank Palestinian children in jail without trial who have been tortured. This has been documented by numerous international agencies. But I really want to go back to the treatment
wait, let me just stop real quick, okay? That is a load of crap. I just want to say that's a load of crap. That is not true. They are not imprisoned. They are not tortured. And these are talking points put out by the anti-Israeli people. I can give you documents. You want documentation?
These are things put out by B'Tselem, which is an Israeli civil rights group.
No, that is a group that is anti-Israel. Let me tell you something. September 2015 through 2016, I'm giving you exact facts here, okay? 47 people killed in Palestinian terrorist attacks, 675 others wounded. These attacks included 169 stabbings, 104 attempted stabbings, 139 shootings, 55 incidents of vehicular ramming and one bus bombing. Jewish Israelis do not do any of those things.
Well, first of all, my organization is 100% against violence. We do not support terrorism.
Do you support the Palestinians?
Yes.
Well, how can you support them when they're violent people?
Well, I don't, anytime anyone tries to say that this people, whether they be Native Americans or Black Americans or Palestinians, this people is a terrorist.
Well, you're saying the same thing about Israel. This people, when you talk about Israel, but you don't want me to say it about the Palestinians.
No, I'm saying that there are some members of the Israeli military, and you're right, I'm sorry, I should go back. Yes, I did speak too quickly there, so I do accept that I was too broad-based in my statement. But there are many cases where settlers have attacked the lands, have chopped down olive trees. There was a case last year where 3 settlers burned a home and killed a few people. Now, luckily, those people were arrested, so I accept the fact that Israel has tried. But, Israel has a rule that says that if a Palestinian is suspected of terrorism, their house can be destroyed.
Correct.
Now, that's without trial, just because they're suspected. Now, so by that rule, why aren't the homes of the 3 Israelis who killed an 18-month-old baby, why weren't their homes destroyed?
You would like to have that happen, wouldn't you?
No, I think neither one should happen.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is there's unequal treatment. If you go to a Palestinian village within Israel, and the Israeli government admits this, you'll see it in the Knesset debate, the amount of money allocated for education, for public works, and for public health in Arab communities in Israel is far less than for Jewish communities.
Because they don't pay taxes.
No, they do pay
No,
taxes.
they do not pay
you cannot
taxes.
live
No,
in the
they-
state of Israel
no,
without paying taxes.
No, you're absolutely incorrect on this. I did my research on this. They do not pay taxes. If they paid taxes, Israel would adhere to what they do for the other places that do. You have Arabs, you have Palestinian Arabs in Israel who have committed themselves to the continuation of Israel as a Jewish state, who do pay taxes. And these people live in homes near my cousin, as I mentioned, and they're afforded the same benefits and opportunities.
No,
My
not.
cousin, listen, I've seen these places. I've been in these homes before. So you're telling me no, and I've seen it with my own eyes. So you can't tell me I have lying eyes. I've seen it with my own eyes.
I'm not saying. I agree that there are some people who
Some
have
people.
big homes and who make a lot of money, and that's great. I'm not against Israel, and I'm not denying the
Well, sure
many
you are.
wonderful things that Israel has done. But the good things that they've done don't make up for the bad things.
All right, we're going to come back and talk about whether or not Israel should even be a Jewish state. Because that's what you alluded to earlier, and you said, well, you're like, yeah, I'm not sure it even should be a Jewish state. Well, we'll talk about that. And we'll get to your calls as well. 733-KXNT, 733-5968. Talking with Seth Morrison. He is the coordinator for the Jewish Voice for Peace. Your calls and more coming up next on News Talk 840 AM KXNT. 3:34 at KXNT, and a good afternoon. Great to have you with us. Don't forget, we've got our movie reviews at the 5 o'clock hour. Also, our pet pick of the week, which you can get a preview of at allenstock.com, KXNT.com, or either one of our Facebook pages. Joining me in studio is a coordinator for the Jewish Voice for Peace here in Las Vegas, Seth Morrison, and I appreciate your coming in this afternoon. Should Israel be a Jewish state? You didn't think that it should be because there's a conflict between a Jewish state and a democratic state. I partly agree with you, by the way. Okay, I don't think it should be a democratic state. I think that the Arabs ought to be living in where they come from, Arabia. That's what their name comes from. Jews should be afforded the opportunity to live in Judea. That's where we come from, Jews, Judea. And yeah, I mean, so the people who don't want to adhere to Israel as a Jewish state move to, I don't care where they go. They go to Jordan, Lebanon, they can go to Syria, they can go to Egypt. I don't care where the hell they go. But yeah, Israel should be a Jewish state, and I don't think it should be democratic in the least bit.
Well, first of all, thank you again for having me here.
Absolutely.
And for being open to present and to hear some different perspectives. The challenge is that the majority of Jews left the area that we now call Israel or Palestine over 2,000 years ago. And
They were kicked out.
they were kicked out,
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
They just didn't leave voluntarily.
Right. They
Going
were
home to
kicked
see
out.
mom or something like that. Okay.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
But, you create this belief that this ancient possession, this ancient living there, gives us rights 2,000 years later over people who lived there. From the time that the Zionist movement began in the late 1800s, there were numerous Arabs living in that region. And
More Jews than Arabs, by the way. More Jews than Arabs. Go ahead.
depending on the timing and
Okay.
when. But you can't just say to these people, the heck with you, you're all leaving. And basically what happened after the Holocaust was that you had a very large number of displaced Jews that the U.S. didn't want and that Europe didn't want, and that they therefore sent to Israel. Now, yes, there are ancient ties, but that doesn't negate the rights of the people who live there. And, if you say that and set the precedent that we can go back to ancient history, well, then why don't we turn Europe over to the Romans? And why don't we turn the U.S. over to the Native Americans?
Why don't we?
Well,
Why don't we? I mean, I'll tell you what.
massive disruption.
The most ancient of all historic land agreements and obligations was given to the Jews by God, and it's in the Torah that they should always have this particular area, and it's well defined. The area actually is defined. So if you believe, I don't know if you're Jewish in your heart. I mean, you may be Jewish by birth, but I don't know how much you're Jewish in your heart. But if you believe in the Torah and you believe that it was given to Moses in a divine way by God, then you understand that, in fact, the Jews are fulfilling today a prophecy that was given to them by God thousands of years ago. And
Do you believe that a Jew who violates Shabbat should be stoned?
I think that there are a lot of things that were initiated back in those days that are no longer applicable because the temple no longer exists. When
why can you pick...
Wait. When the temple existed, you had sacrifices as an example. All right, and the first temple was destroyed, and the second temple, the third temple has not been rebuilt yet. But when the third temple is rebuilt, they say when the Messiah comes, yes, people will go back to doing those things that you might consider to be horrendous. Now, you might think that stoning someone who works on a Shabbos is a bad thing. We don't do it today, obviously. But there are other aspects of sacrifice, things like that may happen if the time comes that we rebuild the third temple. It's a possibility.
Do you believe that you can be a legitimate Jew and be a Reformed Jew?
I think that Reformed Jews actually, I think that what they're doing is they're trying to skip out on most things being Jewish, and they're trying to go, well, I'm Jewish, but I don't have to observe all these other things. I think there is a huge difference between Reform and Orthodox Jews. Yes, absolutely.
Right. So basically, what you're saying is that you can decide to pick and choose between things that are in the Torah, that you believe that certain elements of the Torah are totally binding and that we should own, this land, even though there are other people who live there, yet other things in the Torah you choose to accept or not accept.
I accept what's in the Torah, and I accept the fact that there have been modifications made over the years because, again, the temples have not been built. I also know this, that when you talk about the timing on this, you don't want to go back to the biblical times. You're rejecting that, I can tell. Let's go back to what happened. Ottoman Empire rules the land from 1650 to 1918. And you're familiar, I think, with the agreements that were made between the British and the French. Mm-hmm. They were the ones who divided that area up.
Correct.
All right. They were the ones who divided it up. And it was decided that there was going to be a Jewish state. Now, you understand what I'm saying to you? I said a Jewish state. You can call it, a make company if you want to. It's a Jewish state, okay? And what happened was the Arabs rejected that right out of hand. So the day that Israel was declared a state, David Ben-Gurion said, I quote his words, "The establishment of a Jewish state in Eretz Yisrael to be known as the State of Israel," end of quote. May 14th, 1948, they were attacked by Jordan. Jordan invaded as soon as Britain left. So they've been fighting for their survival ever since. These other countries, if they lost, all of them, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, if they lost, they went back home. If Israel lost, they would be in the sea. They'd be dead. They could not lose. And that's why they have had to, out of survival, win each subsequent war. So there was an opportunity to go ahead and have a two-state solution, but one was to be a Jewish state. Arabs rejected that. Palestinians rejected the two-state solution, and the result was that they don't want it as a Jewish state. And you support that idea. It shouldn't be a Jewish state when this is what was decided by the UN back on November 29th, 1947.
Well, let me clarify what I believe in. And first of all, I should say that your chronology is correct, and the fact that the Arab countries did not accept partition is correct. I agree with all of that. I want a state or two states. I don't really care if it's one state or two states.
Okay.
I want people to have full, equal, and democratic rights. In a state where the majority of people are Jews, I am fine with that, using the Hebrew language, in Saturday being the Shabbat, in having kosher food. I accept all of that. What I do not accept is that somebody should be a second-class citizen. And the same thing in a Palestinian state. I fully believe that if there is a Palestinian state, that Jews who want to live there should have the right to.
Yeah, but you understand, and you're a smart guy, and you understand that the Palestinian charter calls for not one Jew is to live in Palestine, which they would call their state. Not one Jew. And you know it's in there. You've seen it. I've seen it.
there are a lot of old documents that are
No,
around.
no,
but
these
the Palestinian
they adhere to this. Not one Jew allowed to live in Palestine. And
There are
democratic
Jews who
Israel.
live in
What?
There are Jews who live in Palestine.
No, there are no Jews. How many Jews live in Gaza right now? Count them. How many?
No, I didn't say in Gaza.
Well,
but
I'm starting with Gaza. We'll work our way north from the south. How many? None. Zero.
In Gaza, there are none that I know of. In Ramallah, I know of about 3. I agree.
What I said was,
numbers.
if there was a state of if there was a 2-state solution, which I'm not sure would ever work, but if there's a 2-state solution, and you had a Jewish state of Israel, and you had a Palestinian state side by side, I'm just saying to you, number one, they wouldn't recognize Israel as being a Jewish state, but also they would not allow one Jew to live in there. That's in their charter.
Yes, there are things in the Palestinian Authority or the PLO and in the Hamas charter that I don't agree with. But these are things that can and should be negotiated. See, what I have a problem with is predetermining who will be allowed to do what in what future scenario. The Arafat and Abbas have been very clear that they are willing to negotiate, that they have recognized the state of Israel. Now, yes, you're right, they have not added the word Jewish state.
That's right.
But they have recognized a democratic state of Israel. They have recognized that the majority of that population is and will be Jewish, and they have no problem with that. The problem they have is with the occupation and with dealing with the Nakba and the fact that 600,000 Palestinians were evicted from what is now the state of Israel in 1947 and 48.
Absolutely not true. I'm going to come back and prove it to you in a moment.
Okay.
That is absolutely not
I'm
true.
Curious to hear how
we'll
prove
pick up. We'll pick up on that one right when we come on back. And I do want to get to the calls. I promise I'll pick up on that, and then we'll get to your calls at 733-KXNT. Some people have been holding for a while, and I do want to get to them. I'm Alan Stockton. This is KXNT. 347 at KXNT, and a good afternoon. Great to have you with us, and I do want to thank you so much for joining us. I promise we'll get to your calls in a moment. I have Seth Morrison here. He is the coordinator for the organization Jewish Voice for Peace, and again, I want to thank you for being here. I do want to get to the calls, but I promised first I would answer the charge that you made that a bunch of Arabs were kicked out in 47. In fact, history is that the countries surrounding Israel at the time said to all of the, and they said to all of them, they didn't all listen, they said to all of the Arabs, not Palestinians, Arabs who lived inside of Israel, vacate, come with us, fight Israel. We're going to drive the Jews into the sea. Their words, not mine. Drive the Jews to the sea. And then when every Jew is gone, you can go back and live where you want, go back in your home. And tons of people, you're right, hundreds of thousands left. And they said, yes, we're going to fight with you, our Arab brothers. Let's kill the Jews. Well, they did. They went and they fought, and they lost their asses big time. And the result was they found themselves then in camps that were controlled by who? Let's see. Yes, their Arab brothers. For all those years, their Arab brothers kept them in camps all those years. So Israel didn't kick them out. And now I know I'm going to segue to one other thing you said, then I'll let you respond, then we'll get to the calls, that you said that they were given, tried to negotiate. In 2000, in the fall of 2000, when the Prime Minister Barack sat down with Yasser Arafat and Bill Clinton, who was president at the time, Barack gave everything to Arafat. Clinton negotiated everything except 2 things. One was calling it a Jewish state. We'll never do that, Arafat said, 2000. Number 2, we demand the right of these people to return, and not only them to return who left in 47 and 48, but their progeny, their children, children's children, grandchildren, all those people to return. We will not accept, Arafat said, payment, money. We want them to return. Smart move on his part, because what he wanted to do was make sure that the majority of the people in quote-unquote Israel were more Palestinians. So if it's a democratic state, they would have control. He had an opportunity to be able to have peace and have half of Jerusalem, by the way. That was part of it. Barack gave him half of Jerusalem. But you know what they said about Arafat? Never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity.
Well, I would refer you to a book by Ari Shavit, who is an Israeli historian, a Zionist, and he has significant documentation of Israeli soldiers evicting Palestinians. Yes, there were some of the broadcasts you talked about, and yes, some people left for the reasons you said, but there's also significant documentation in Israel's archives of Palestinians or of Arabs who were evicted. And Shavit's very interesting because as a Zionist, he says, you know, this was wrong. We knew it was wrong, but we had to do it. And we did it for the sake of the Jews. And that sums up so many of these arguments. And I think a big challenge for the Palestinians and for many who I've talked to personally is the fact that Israel denies what happened and refuses to even discuss making up for it. Now, I definitely understand why in a two-state solution you wouldn't want hundreds of thousands of non-Jews coming in. And I think that can be dealt with. You know, a Palestinian friend of mine said to me maybe 2 years ago, he said, you know, if only Israel would accept and take some responsibility for what happened, I believe, my friend, Palestinian friend talking, I believe that there are many Palestinians who would be perfectly happy to go live in a Palestinian state. There are many Palestinians living in camps who would be perfectly happy to go live in the U.S. or Europe with their relatives. The number of actual people who would want to go back to Israel and live in what would be basically a Jewish state is probably very small. Well, we have to give them options and deal with it.
This is a subjective thought from a friend of yours who's a Palestinian.
Absolutely.
So I mean, that's a subjective thought.
Absolutely.
But the bottom line is, as I said, when Israel was declared a state in November of 47 by the UN, and it became a fact in May 14th, 1948, they were attacked and they wanted to drive the Jews to the sea. Now, that is not my idea of can't we all just get along? I mean, that doesn't happen. I know now, in order to resume talks, you've got Mahmoud Abbas and others saying, let's return to the 1967 borders and stuff like that. Well, hell, there were borders in 1967 that existed, but Israel was still attacked. I mean, you're not going to give land for peace because these folks have no intention of having any kind of peace except a piece of people's bodies floating in the sea. They don't want Jews living there. They've been very clear about that. They do not want to recognize a Jewish state. Even you don't want to recognize a Jewish state. And you are a born Jew, but in your heart, I'm not sure what's going on because it is a Jewish state. And God forbid it ever doesn't remain that. I would give up the democracy as you want it to be. I would give the democracy in a heartbeat to maintain a Jewish state. If a Jewish state existed in the 1930s and 40s, you wouldn't have had 6 million slaughtered in the camps in Europe. It would not have happened, And that's why, God forbid, we ever lose Israel today, we are up the creek without a paddle. I'm going to go to some calls. A lot of people have been holding a long time, and I apologize, but I wanted to get into some of this. Ty, you're on KXNT. A quick comment or question, sir?
Hi, Alan. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Go right ahead, sir.
I just wanted to, there's a million questions. I'll narrow it down to one because obviously we're short on time.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask Seth, when was the last time and how frequently he visits in Israel?
How frequently? Oh, sorry, what was that, sir?
I wanted to ask Seth, how frequently and when was the last time he visited in Israel?
How frequently are you in Israel and when was the last time?
I've been there 11 times. I've tried to go, depending on what was going on, every 2 or 3 years.
Last time, though?
Last time was in November of 2016, just a few months ago.
Okay. And do you visit Ramallah and Gaza as well?
I have not visited Gaza since 1988. I do visit Ramallah. I have spent many nights in Ramallah and in Palestinian refugee camps.
And I think that you go in with security?
Absolutely not.
You do not go in with security.
Some of the trips I've gone alone, and in my most recent trip, I was with a group of other Americans, but absolutely no security. I'll
be very short. I lived in Israel. I served in the military for 3 years. I can tell you, first of all, the Israeli military is the most humane in the whole world. There's no doubt about that. And basically within the Palestinian territory, I, as an Israeli, used to visit, like you said, until around 1998. I used to live right around the border over there. And from 1998 and on, whoever would go in without any security would be lynched and murdered on spot, unless you probably are able to go and organize due to your group, because you guys are great supporters of Palestine. But as an Israeli citizen, we do not go into the Palestinian territory. And as service in the military, I basically day-to-day sat on the border and allowed Palestinians to come into Israel and out daily by the thousands, because believe me, they do want to go into Israel and they do want to work because of what's going on within their territory. So, like I said, I do have much more to say. I'd love to stay on the line, but Alan, I'm sure you are short on time.
I appreciate your call. Ty, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to continue. Can you stay for a while here?
Yes.
Because I've got
Happy
every
to
line
stay.
going crazy, and I want to get to the calls.
Love to have them.
I apologize for not getting to you sooner, but we are going to get to your calls, I promise, and much more right here on KXNT. I'm Alan Stock. All right, it's 3:58 here at KXNT, and a good afternoon. Great to have you with us. I've got Seth Morrison. He is the coordinator for the Jewish Voice for Peace. And these are folks from the left. Yes, I'm from the right, in some ways far right, especially when it comes to where they're coming from. But we're going to come on back. We got a lot of lines left. We got a couple open. That's it. 733-KXNT, 733-5968. I want to give you the chance to get your questions answered, and we'll get back to Seth Morrison. A lot more to talk about as we talk about whether or not Israel should be a Jewish state or a democratic state, and could there ever be peace in the Middle East? I think that's another important question to ask. And some of us are skeptical. I can tell you that right now. 733-KXNT, 733-5968. I'm Alan Stock, and this is News Talk 840 AM KXNT. And be sure you tell all your friends and relatives everywhere that we are streaming live at KXNT.com. Back right after news here on KXNT. 4:33 at KXNT, and a good afternoon. Great to have you with us, and I want to thank you so much for joining us. I have with me the coordinator for Jewish Voice for Peace, local organization here in Las Vegas. Seth Morrison is the coordinator, and I appreciate your being here this afternoon. I want to get to a couple of calls, and then I got some more things I want to cover, and there's so little time. I feel like I'm rushing through it here. Let us head on over to Cassius. Cassius, you're on KXNT. A quick question or comment, sir?
Yes, fantastic subject, by the way. You know, there already exists a Palestinian state, and you can inform your guest if he hasn't already figured it out. It's called Jordan. And in fact, the king of Jordan, the king of the Hashemite state, and the PLO even agreed to that the so-called Palestinians are in fact 99% Jordanian by extraction with a little Syrian thrown in. There's no such thing as a Palestinian Arab. And let me make one more point, because I think your guest is probably a kind man, and I would never question whether he's a good Jew or a renegade Jew. I don't know what's in his heart. But he's monumentally misled. When it comes to the so-called refugees and the Arab people that were so-called and allegedly pushed out of the state of Israel in 1948, the vast majority of them left voluntarily because the Arab states that immediately attacked Israel after the UN mandate said, leave now so we can safely destroy the Jews and push them into the sea.
Yeah,
and this whole Palestinian issue has nothing to do with the homeland. It has to do with the destruction of the Jews. And let me just bring him back to one point of history as well. When it comes to the Arab Muslims' desire to kill the Jews, we can go back to the war years during the Second World War. And the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem was very laudatory toward Hitler's attempt to destroy the Jews in Europe before there was even any type of population within what was then known as Palestine. So I think your monumentally misled guest needs to reread his history. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it very much. Do you want to respond? Go right ahead.
Well, I want to pick up on one point because I already debunked the myth about the Palestinians leaving voluntarily. But you talk about the king. I know we disagree. I know, but I got my point out, as did you. When you talk about the fact that these people are, quote, Jordanian, let's remember that Jordan was a colonial construct. There was never any such thing, or there was never a country of Jordan. There was never an area of Jordan. Jordan was created by the British to reward the Hashemite king, and the British said, we're going to give you a country, and we're going to call it Jordan. So there's a little bit of inaccuracy in what you were saying.
Well, the truth is, you're partially right, and that there was no Jordan, there was no Iraq, There was no Saudi Arabia. I mean, all these things were again, we talked about this at the very, very beginning of the last hour, and that is that when the British and French divided everything up, then they decided to construct how they wanted it. By the way, Russia got the chance to do a little bit also, and they got a little bit of influence there. My mind, right now slips it a bit. Why is it, and I'll let you answer that. I want to get to the calls, but I'd rather ask you this. How are you supporting people, the so-called Palestinian Muslim Arabs, who are giving money to people for being terrorists or martyrs? I mean, that doesn't make your skin crawl that they're giving money to these people. I mean, this doesn't happen anywhere in the world except with these so-called Palestinian Muslim Arabs.
Well, I can't say strongly enough of condemning all forms of violence and terrorism.
No, I want this
right,
form of violence.
I know. But I think you have a situation of tremendous dichotomy, tremendous imbalance. And, you have the Israelis that are the strongest army in the region that have nuclear weapons in spite of designing it, of denying that they have those nuclear weapons.
I hope they have lots of them.
And you have many people who I believe are Palestinian. You want to call them Arab, that's fine. But they are living under oppression. Now, oppressed people do things that I don't necessarily like, but they do things like that. Second of all, the whole idea of who's a hero and who's a terrorist is in the eye of the beholder. And, the Irgun killed British soldiers and killed Arabs.
And why do they do that?
I'm not getting into why.
Oh, whoa. They just didn't walk up and say,
right, but
I want to
believe. I'm not saying that Palestinians who kill Jews are right, but what I'm saying is that people who are oppressed, as the Jews were in that situation, yes, Begin felt. And Begin and those in the Irgun and other Jewish terrorist groups felt that they were protecting their people and protecting their heritage.
Real quick, let me just give a little sense of history real quickly and put this in perspective, because the British were taking guns away from Jews, and either where they were imprisoning them as well if they found guns, and so the Jews had to secretly bring guns in. And so you're justifying Jewish terrorism, but condemning Palestinian terrorism. No. Well, they were bringing. Let me finish. They were not only imprisoning Jews, they were killing Jews also. The British were,
right.
and what the Irgun did was they blew up a wing of the King David Hotel. That is fact, and they did it to be able to say to the British, "You are not going to put us in a situation of being slaughtered." The British intention was to disarm all Jews, and they figured on, and this is absolute history again, May 14th, as soon as it was declared a state, they figured that the Arabs would overrun the Jews because they didn't have any guns. They had no ammunition. They would immediately be wiped out, and they'd go back to being friendly with the Arabs again. So what the Jews did was they made a point of trying to, are you ready for this one? This is a wild idea. Wild. They made a point of surviving. Had they lost that, I told you, they'd be gone. All the other people can return to their borders, but not the Jews. They had to survive in order to be able to live at all. You and I both talked about before we went on the air. We were in a kibbutz that actually made those movinitions down in a cellar area. We were there just 2 weeks ago, where they made those rounds by the thousands, so the 9mm rounds, so they could defend themselves against the onslaught of Arabs. This is what happened. This is why they defended themselves. These people who are these people, you're saying they're feeling bad. The Muslim terrorist, Arab, Palestinian, whoever they are. These people are being paid money in order to murder people, to drive cars into people. And I'm not talking about the top British soldiers like Menachem Begin was killing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about children. I'm talking about children and women and innocent people. That's who they're killing. I mean, these people are frickin' animals for what they're doing. They're animals.
But you see, the problem with what you're saying is, A, you're condemning all Palestinians.
I'm not. I am not condemning all Palestinians. Not doing that. Not doing that at all.
You just said these people are animals.
These people who are committing these crimes by driving cars into women and children at bus stops. These people are animals and ought to be, and thank God they are oftentimes, shot on the spot.
Right, but the fact that there are some criminals in a group doesn't mean that the overwhelming majority of people should be discriminated against and should be second-class citizens.
Yeah, but you want to turn around but you want to discriminate against all of Israel because of what some Israelis you say are doing, and you want to be able to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel as an entire entity for what you say some people are doing. Let me ask you.
Well, I'm saying the government is doing. There's a difference between what some people do and what the government does.
But I'm going back again. It's written into the Palestinian law. The government of Palestine, or whatever it is right now, the Palestinian law is that these terrorists and martyrs are going to be paid money when they kill people and they martyr themselves or they wind up in prison. That's a whole entity in itself. Why aren't you condemning them? Why aren't you out demonstrating against them? Why aren't you demonstrating against Saudi Arabia for cutting gays' heads off and throwing gays off a building? The only country in the entire Middle East that allows gays to be free without any kind of obstruction is Israel. They have a gay parade every year in Tel Aviv.
I will gladly join anyone who wants to do a demonstration
against
South America.
South America? I'm talking about
South America. Sorry,
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. I will gladly demonstrate against
Iran. They do the same thing.
Absolutely.
Muslim countries. This is Muslims. The Muslim religion is a terrorist organization in itself.
No, that is a statement that I cannot allow.
I don't care. I tell you that it absolutely.
There are many Muslim people who are very nice people, who are honest and good people.
Yes, they are.
I'm a gay man. I am out to all my Muslim friends. They know I'm gay. And
you better not go to Saudi Arabia.
No,
dude.
It's true. I won't go to Saudi Arabia. And I'm not going to go to Iran either.
Go to any of those countries.
But none of that justifies how the Israelis are treating Palestinians. And let's remember that the U.S. government is giving $4 billion a year to the Israeli government to maintain the oppression of Palestinians.
There is no oppression going on to Palestinians.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you something.
There's a tremendous amount of oppression.
I have already told you how they are paid the same thing when they go to work in factories.
About one instance, which
two instances. Two. I was in two.
Instances.
I was two.
But
they were not related.
The majority of people are still discriminated against. There's still 400 communities.
Well, then they should be
Israel.
telling the Palestinian Authority to be paying them more than the $1,200 they start out and pay, as opposed to the 4,500 shekels that they're getting from the Israelis. They're getting almost 3 to 4 times more by working for an Israeli company than they are from a Palestinian Authority. I mean, that's absolutely the fact. And you should be, as a gay man, you should be outraged at the fact that, and you should be down on your knees thanking God that Israel exists as a haven for gays in the Middle East, because it's the only place that they are safe. I mean, I don't care who they are, men, women, lesbians, gays, they're safe in Israel. In any of the Muslim countries, they are dead. And you should be out there demonstrating against these people.
But my tax money is not going to support the oppression in Saudi Arabia, and it is going to support the oppression in Israel, and that is what I object to.
Well, I don't see any.
The fact that there's a lot of evil in the world, there's only so much we have to fight each evil as we can. And
I'm amazed that you, as a Jew, have picked on Israel when, as a gay Jew, it's the only place you could go in the Middle East. There ain't no other place you can go. You can't do it.
Right. I have no desire to go to the other places.
Well, because you want to live.
I do go to Israel. I do send money. There's an organization called the Jerusalem Open House for Pride and Tolerance, which is an LGBT community center in downtown Jerusalem that I send money to every year. You can talk to them. They know my name. They know my political beliefs, and they're very glad to get my checks every year.
I'll take your word for it. I'm sure it's the case. I'm talking with Seth Morrison. He's the coordinator for the Jewish Voice for Peace, and we're going to continue and wrap things up in just a moment right here on KXNT. I'm Alan Stock. 448 at KXNT, and a good afternoon. It's great to have you with us on this Friday. Coming up during the next hour, we've got tickets to give away, too. UNLVino's Bubblicious on March 30th at the Venetian. How cool is that? We'll do that next hour. And also we will be giving away, well, that's all we're going to give away. But we do have Jeffrey K. Howard in joining us for movie reviews and, of course, our pet pick of the week. You can find it at KXNT.com as well as AlanStock.com and either one of our Facebook pages. Seth Morrison is the local coordinator for the Jewish Voice for Peace. And, again, Seth, I appreciate the fact that you've come in this afternoon facing a barrage of, obviously people, maybe some agree, but most, I think, would disagree. We just got back from our trip to Israel and touring we were in Gush Etzion and all the way to up to the Golan Heights. And, boy, it's a good thing that the Jews control and have liberated the Golan Heights, because from there, at the very top, we were at a UN outpost, and you could see where Syria is and Israel, and you could see all, and God forbid if Syria had that like they did at one time, I mean, the vantage point that they would have would be tremendous. So, I mean, I was grateful that Israel has liberated this land that was stolen by the Arabs back in 1947, 48, 49. And regarding the Gush Etzion, I mean, we were right by there, and right where the three boys were kidnapped in 2014 that precipitated the war that particular year. And again, these are, these people who do these kinds of things. Yes, I think are absolute animals. And not every Palestinian. We met some Palestinians in Bethlehem, and these people, the ones we talked to, they were friendly as could be. We had a Jewish guy named Roeh, and he was friends with some of the folks in the Palestinian Muslim Arabs in Bethlehem, and they were very, very nice, and very accommodating. I'm amazed at what goes on, in Bethlehem. The Palestinian Arab Muslims control Bethlehem, and it was amazing to see how they live their lives. When they want to throw trash out, they find an empty lot and they just all throw the trash. I mean, they don't pick it up. They don't deal with it. They don't live like any of us in Vegas live. I can tell you that. And when the sewage comes out of their house. I mean, again, these are things I saw. No, I didn't read about it, didn't see movies about it. When the sewage comes out of their house, it runs down the hill, and it goes in the street, and it goes into other people's yards. I mean, they don't think about health and about protecting themselves. And, again, they're controlling Bethlehem. They're the ones who run Bethlehem, not the Jews. And I'm amazed, absolutely amazed. I want to ask you one other quick question, very important, because I know you're not J Street, but I want to tell you, J Street officials and speakers condemn Israel's creation as wrong and unjust. Do you believe that Israel's creation was wrong and unjust?
It's a hard one to answer because in hindsight, yes, but I understand what existed at the time.
In hindsight, yes, it was unjust.
Yeah, I mean, there were people living there who the British basically ignored. The British, as the colonial power, did not listen to what Jews or Muslims or anybody else cared about, and they did this arbitrarily. But I also believe that what was done was done. I mean, I don't believe that Israel has to go away. I believe it has to change. But I don't think I don't believe at all that we can totally reverse history.
Tell me one thing that was wrong or unjust about the creation of Israel. One thing, not two, just one.
The elimination, which I know you say it didn't happen, but the fact that Israel evicted hundreds of thousands of people from their homes.
Don't forget, the United Nations in November 47.
This happened.
In November 47, they said, the UN said there would be two states.
Yes, they did.
And the Arabs and the so-called Palestinians,
I never denied that.
They all rejected that.
I never denied that.
Israel fought for their...
But that didn't give Israel the right to evict the residents.
But the history says, and it's absolutely true, that the Arabs said to their Arab brethren,
it is
"You
not
call Palestinians
absolutely true.
Absolutely,
I mean,
it is
declare it true.
No,
I don't believe it's true. It may be true to you. It is not.
I would encourage you to
read Israeli histories.
I would encourage you to read.
There are documents in the Israeli government archives that document that Israel evicted people. Now, you can deny it, but that doesn't mean it isn't there.
I can tell you this. The overwhelming numbers of people who left what we call Israel, left at the behest of their brethren who said, come join us. We will drive the Jews in the sea. Their intent was not a two-state solution. It was what? It was to make sure that every Jew was eradicated from the Middle East. Their words, not mine, by the way.
Yes,
it drive the Jews into the sea.
I agree. They attacked Israel.
What's Israel supposed to do?
It doesn't change the fact that Israel did evict these people.
I don't think they evicted that many people, and if they did, you know what? They didn't evict enough. And I'll tell you something else. In 1967, when they won all this, they should not have never allowed Jordan to control the Temple Mount. That's insane. Muslims can pray there, but Jews and Christians can't. I was at the Tomb of the Patriarchs in Hebron. You ever been there?
I was there.
Yeah.
I was outside of it. I haven't been in it.
Okay. Well, you didn't pray there, though. I can tell you that.
I didn't pray there.
You're
no.
damn right you didn't, because you're a Jew, and you can't do that. But I'll tell you this.
There were Jews who
not
were
praying,
with me.
Not praying. You cannot go inside
in
and pray. You cannot go inside and pray. I was inside, and they don't you dare pray. The Arabs control it. And the same with the Temple Mount. You know, you cannot, if they think that your lips are moving, you're doing a prayer.
On the Temple Mount, that's true.
And by the way, Temple Mount, it's a mosque that was built on top of a synagogue. So, I mean,
correct.
Okay,
animals. But that
animals.
whole region is layer on layer.
Well, the whole region. When Muslims take over something, they take their mosques and put them on tops of churches and on tops of synagogues and they say you cannot touch our mosque.
Right, but see, that's part of attacking Islam that I have a real problem with, because the fact is the Christians, when you go to that area and go layer by layer, the Christians built their churches on top of synagogues.
Well, right now I'm talking about the Temple Mount and the fact that if Israel had been smarter in '67, they would have said Jordan is not going to control this area. We're going to do it, and then they should have taken that little gold piece of crap and they should have taken it off the synagogue, and it should have been liberated as most of Israel was. I can say you this from my heart, absolutely, Israel should never give up 1 inch of what they've liberated. Never 1 inch of what they liberated. And they've already given Gaza. And if Palestinians want to have a country, expand some of the area into the Sinai and let next to Gaza, let them all live down there and rot in hell. With all due disrespect, of course.
No, I understand. Obviously, you have your opinion. I knew your opinion when I came on the show.
I know.
I respect
and
you
I respect
for
the fact that you came on
me.
anyway. I do respect that very, very much. I got to take a break. We'll continue in a moment. You have the last word, too. I'll give you the last word on this. I'm Alan Stock, and this is KXNT.
This Sound Off segment is coming up next on News Talk 840 AM. KXNT.
458 here at KXNT, and I want to thank so much for joining us. Yes, Sound Off coming up right after the top of the hour news. Seth Morrison, the head of the Jewish Voice for Peace. I just had to give you the last word, and I mean that.
Well, no, thank you. Obviously, we disagree, and you gave me a chance to make my points, which I sincerely appreciate. I am a Jew. I'm proud of my Jewish heritage, and I have many friends and family members in Israel. I am doing this because I believe that Israel, that these people, both Jews and Palestinians, Israelis, Arabs, will be better off if they can end the oppression, resolve the situation, and find a way to live together. And I think all of us want the best. We disagree on how to get there. Thank you.
Seth Morrison, a very nice man, and obviously you're right, we do disagree. And I'll get you some things to read up on, and maybe that'll change your mind a little bit. But thank you very much for coming in. I do appreciate it. And I wanted to be as respectful as possible, even though I know we disagreed. All right, we've got the Sound Off segment coming up next, and after that, we've also got tickets to the UNLVino's Bubblicious, March 30th at the Venetian, Jeffrey K. Howard movie reviews, and, of course, our pet pick of the week. All that and more coming up during the next hour on KXNT. I'm Alan Stock.